All right, so Mark Cuban is in the hot seat, I guess, now. As Attorney General Eric Holder said, we are cowards when it comes to race. Yet it seems when people who are not black talk about race, which people keep saying we need to have this conversation. Apparently, you can only have the conversation from one side because even if you give your true, honest opinions and feelings, you're still a racist, even though you want to have that conversation, so you can have that dialogue. Apparently, you can't come from your point of view without being interrupted or being told what you're saying is something that you're not even saying. But I'll just give my take on the host Mark Cuban situation. All right, so the premise of what was said by Mark Cuban was that I guess he admitted that if he saw specifically a black kid in a hoodie at night he's crossing the street, and he made another statement that if he saw a person resembling a skinhead, he would go back across the street. Now, one thing I see people saying that's a false equivocation, but I don't understand how you're going to tell someone else what they fear as a false equivocation. Like, how are you going to say that doesn't go together, right? When we all know that if you've been in a neighborhood, that's a bad neighborhood, and if a crime goes off when they're looking for somebody, if you're wearing all black on a black hoodie, you didn't have to do it, but you're going to get stopped. You're going to get bothered. So this narrative that you don't understand that attire at night especially is synonymous with certain behaviors, I think you're being dishonest. But anyways, Mark Cuban stated that the threat of the, because he's talking about his fear, right? What he would do in a situation. But he's saying that the threat of the skinhead-looking dude is more of a threat than a black kid in a hoodie, so he would go back across the street. And yet, people, I guess, they try to take it out of that context and make it about something else. People can't use their critical thinking skills and focus on situations without, bringing emotion to it. I guess he already apologized for it, so you can't even defend it. But he apologized to Trayvon Martin's family because he probably shouldn't use that analogy, even though he's telling you his own fears, right? But some other people had saying that he's only doing this to defend Donald Sterling, whatever. That's an opinion I have. But the premise of what he was saying is that we all have our own biases, we all have our own fears, and most of us we feel we don't know. And you would think that's just pretty common sense and pretty simple. Of course, a lot of backlash in the sports arena. A lot of people. I've seen some debates between back and forth. So it's not all one-sided. It's not all the emotional response. It's some people holding their breath and calming down and saying, I get what he's saying. Yes, what he's saying is true. Now, some people are trying to make the argument saying that, well, because people have these fears, they'll respond or they'll react. And that's not in the conversation. Like, that's something different. Like, you're trying to make it about that. No, he's saying that if he saw these things, he would remove himself from the situation. He's not saying that he would attack somebody because he assumes that that person is a threat to them. He's saying he would walk away from the situation, which, understandable. If I'm 6'4", 300 plus, if I'm walking on the street at night and it's dark and a female's coming on my direction and she feels some type of way, that I'm not, I understand that. It is what it is. I understand what she's doing, right? I can use my critical thinking skills and understand why she might fear, right? And she crosses the street, fight or flight, whatever, her instance came up, right? But that doesn't, I'm not saying that I agree with her because she's scared to just jump out and mace me or spray me because she might fear something. That's a whole different conversation, though. But if she's saying, I'm going to go across the street, hey, that's understood. Now, if she goes across the street, like Mark Cuban's example, and she sees someone that looks just like her, but he attacks her, deuces, stay on that side of the street, don't come back. But anyways, I get the logic behind that and everything. It brings me to, the PC BS political nonsense that's going on. I remember in high school, right, Juan Williams, who I disagree with like 95% of the time, he was fired from NPR because he said if he was on a plane and he saw Muslims and their attire, their garb or whatever, and they were speaking in their language on the plane amongst each other, he said he would be nervous or scared or something like that. And, he got fired from NPR for saying that, right? It was too politically incorrect, even though damn well, especially after 9/11, especially after what happened at the I think it was Fort Hood with the Muslim dude who shot up all those people. After all that happened, I think that's a logical, rational response. you're going to think some type of way or feel some type of way, even though you could be wrong, but it's not like you don't have a reason to think that way. Like, it's just not coming out of nowhere, right? And I just tell a story about I think 9/11 happened, and I was in high school still. We caught, in my city, we catch the metro. We don't catch school buses. We catch the regular public transportation, right, to go to high school. And on a bus one day, there was a guy, and this is like, I think the day after 9/11, and he get on the bus, turban, white shirt, black pants. Now, my first damn thought, when he got on that bus, because he had a suitcase in his hand, was get the hell off the bus. That was my first thought. That was my first reaction. I was like, whoa, right? Just from the glance, the second glance looking at him, right? But what distracted me was this. I'm looking at a brother who was sitting in front of the bus, and his whole body language just, like, you can see the rage and the anger, just his whole facial expression just changed when the man got on the bus. The white lady that was sitting next to him was damn near like, you watched her body jump out of her, her soul jump out of her body into the opposite direction. That's how much her body language was leaning closer to the brother that she was sitting next to. Ironically, maybe if that was 2 days earlier, her response would have been different from sitting next to that brother. But I watched this, and then I'm like, oh snaps! And all this has happened in a matter of like not even 2 minutes, right? Just in slow motion, thinking about it, and it didn't dawn on me for a second until like, oh, wait a minute, the dude is not even a Muslim. He was an Indian. He had on a turban, and he was Hindu. But most people, damn near everybody on that bus, a lot of people on that bus, it was quiet too, like a pin could drop. A lot of people on that bus, they felt some type of way. A lot of people some people were angry, some people were scared. But that was just a normal human reaction, normal human response, right? People fear what we don't know. Not only did we not know, but he wasn't even a Muslim. But and then I get off the bus at that same day, and I see these little ratchet little ghetto white kids. They were going to the Gettys, the gas stations, and they were egging the stores, and out of retaliation for what happened. And I'm like, I go in the store and I'm like, yo, what the freak? We're not Muslims either, and they're dark as me, like real dark skinned Indians. And I'm like, yo, we're Hindu. We're not even Muslims. But anyways, what Juan Williams said is something that most people were thinking and most people feel in that situation. But because he said it, he got fired because of it. And that's crazy when you can say something that other people are feeling, other people are thinking, but out of political correctness, you can't say it publicly. And I see that's what Mark Cuban did. He's saying something he know a lot of people, not just people like him. The hilarious thing about the situation is that there are a lot of black people who feel the same way about their own people, right? They would do exactly the same thing he did in that situation. But for some reason, when we're having this conversation about race, it has to be from one side. It can't be from the other side. You want a dialogue, but when people on the other side say, well, this is how I feel, this is what I think, this is what happened, then you want to silence them, right? You don't want them to have the conversation. You want it to only be from your side.
Wednesday afternoon, I got a message on my cell phone from Ellen Weiss, who's the head of news at NPR, asking me to call. When I called back, she said, what did you say? What did you mean to say? And I said what I meant to say, which is that it's an honest experience that when I'm in an airport and I see people who are in Muslim garb, who identify themselves first and foremost as Muslims, I do a double take. I have a moment of anxiety or fear given what happened on 9/11. That's just a reality. And she went on to say, well, that crosses the line. And I said, what line is that? And she went on to somehow suggest that I had made a bigoted statement. And I said, it's not a bigoted statement. In fact, in the course of this conversation with Bill O'Reilly, said that we have, as Americans, an obligation to be careful to protect the constitutional rights of everyone in the country and to make sure we don't have any outbreak of bigotry. But that there's a reality. You cannot ignore what happened on 9/11, and you cannot ignore the connection to Islamic radicalism, and you can't ignore the fact of what has been even recently said in court with regard to this as the first drop of blood in a Muslim war on America. And then she said, this has been decided up the chain. I said, you mean I don't even get the chance to come in and we do this eyeball to eyeball, person to person, have a conversation? I've been there for more than 10 years. We don't have that chance to have a conversation about this. And she said, there's nothing you can say that will change my mind. This has been decided above me, and we're terminating your contract.
Ironically, Juan Williams, this weird dude, the libertarian leftist, whatever. But he it's crazy how, even though he thinks that, he was wrongly fired and all that, which I agree. Um, Other people have, like, he was in the beginning of the people getting fired for political correctness. He was early on in the beginning of this nonsense. But I've seen him speak on other issues of things that people have said that got them fired publicly in the media or removed or left off TV shows, and he's been on the other side of the argument, though. So he feels that his situation, is not right, and he had a valid reason for saying what he said, but he's been on the other side of the argument for other people, which is kind of odd. But to his point, though, how he felt on that plane, I don't give a damn. I would have felt the same way, especially living in New York, even though, my demographic makeup growing up as a kid was black, white, and Arabic, like Yemenis. They were, part of our where I live at. So it wasn't like some people come here or they're not from here. They never, seen that many Arabics before. They go to the park, they see them, and the women in their full dresses and all that. And some people react to that because they don't know, they've never seen it before. They don't come from communities or areas where they see that type of people. And even though I grew up in that environment and I'm comfortable around them, shoot, I actually grew up around many of the Lackawanna Six.
Charges of supporting terrorism because they attended a terrorist training camp in Afghanistan and met Osama bin Laden 4 months before the 9/11 attacks. Their attorneys had argued that they didn't realize how extreme the camp was, and most of them left early. Yahya Goba, Yashin Taher, Faisal Galab, Shafal Mozed, and Mukhtar al-Bakri all ended up taking pleas and still served anywhere from 7 to 10 years in federal prison. They are all now free. They are Lackawanna High School graduates who were in their 20s when they went to prison. Now they're in their 30s, and some are even raising their own families right back here in Lackawanna or nearby. Attorney Joe Latona represented Faisal Galab.
He has adjusted well. He and his family. He is employed. He is hardworking, and he's getting on with his life.
In Lackawanna's Yemenite community today, it's hard to get anyone to speak publicly about those arrests. I went to the homes of 2 of the Lackawanna Six and were told they were both at work. What should people know 10 years later about this case?
I think what they should know is that the system worked. There was a decision as to how to treat these gentlemen. The decision was made to handle it in the criminal justice system, and the system worked.
Once these 6 men were confronted, how they all decided that they were going to return to their American citizenship and their Western New York roots and now help us in the United States government do everything they could to make amends.
So even though I grew up in a highly Muslim populated area and their presence is normal and used to it or what have you, apart from PC liberals, most people would say, like after certain situations that happened, like I said, for Hood, the situation, the underwear bomber was supposed to be a Muslim, even though I think that was a false flag situation. People have a reason to think that way or to have those fears. Like, it's not like they're just making it up out of nowhere, right? There are experiences and situations in society that happen that make people feel some type of way. So is it that crazy that we live in an environment where a person can't say, if I see some people who look like this specifically after situations that happened like 9/11, after what happened at the embassy in Benghazi, you tell them they can't feel some type of way or they can't express the fact that, not that they would attack them head on and try to do something to them, but that they would keep their eyes open, they would be suspicious, and they would try to remove themselves from the situation. That's ridiculous that we live in a climate where we can't even admit that. Like, we can't even admit, okay, I'm going to tell you this is how I feel. Maybe you can help me understand, how to deal with it. You're not going to tell me what I shouldn't fear, though, or what I shouldn't have an issue with, because, again, there's too many real-life examples of what can happen and what has happened. So even though I grew up in a highly Muslim populated area and their presence is normal and used to it or what have you, apart from PC liberals, most people would say, like after certain situations that happened, like I said, for Hood, the situation, the underwear bomber was supposed to be a Muslim, even though I think that was a false flag situation. People have a reason to think that way or to have those fears. Like, it's not like they're just making it up out of nowhere, right? there are experiences and situations in society that happen that make people feel some type of way. So is it that crazy that we live in an environment where a person can't say, if I see some people who look like this specifically after situations that happened like 9/11, after what happened at the embassy in Benghazi, you tell them they can't feel some type of way, or they can't express the fact that, not that they would attack them head on and try to do something to them, you know, but that they would keep their eyes open, they would be suspicious, and they would try to remove themselves from the situation. You know, that's ridiculous that we live in a climate where we can't even admit that. Like, we can't even admit, okay, you know, I'm going to tell you this is how I feel. Maybe you can help me understand, you know, how to deal with it. You're not going to tell me what I shouldn't fear, though, or what I shouldn't have an issue with, because, again, there's too many real-life examples of what can happen and what has happened. And to the point that, you know, he said, you know, if I was in, Stephen A. Smith even used the same analogy, like if I was in Kentucky on a dark road with my New York State plates, you know, and a pickup truck was following me for some long distances, you know, and a bunch of maybe some Confederate flags were on that truck, or some type of you know, innuendos of supremacy was on that truck, I'd feel some type of way. My spider singles will be tingling, right? That doesn't mean I'm going to automatically, you know, go and attack that person because I fear or I think something might happen, you know. That's not the conversation that people are trying to make. It is, well, because people have these fears, they're going to respond and retaliate or get in front of the situation. No. That, like I said, that chick doesn't have the right to come attack me because she's scared. I respect and understand her walking across the street. I get that. You know, I'm not going to, nobody ran and jumped on that dude they got on the bus and attacked him because they feared he had a bomb in that damn suitcase, right? But many of us did want to get off the bus. I definitely did. I do want to go into a video later about, I mean, I actually did do a video about Donald Trump. I didn't upload it yet. You know, I said in that video too, the only two NBA owners I knew anything of, and I didn't know Donald Trump by name until his NSA girlfriend, you know, went spy bot on him and whatever. But I knew of his organization, like how he ran his team and all that, just because. And I don't even follow basketball, but I knew of him because of, you know, these things I heard in the news a little bit about him. And then Mark Cuban's the only one I knew by name because he's always, you know, being an idiot and getting in trouble, getting fines and all that stuff. But I might upload that eventually. And I do want to do a video, though, where, you know, addressing the Stephen A. Smith nonsense and how, you know, Dr. Moise Watkins, to be just an example, he went in his little rant about how, you know, Stephen A. Smith's opinion is unacceptable. After saying that he wants black people to think for themselves and that black people are not monolithic, he tells Stephen A. Smith that he can't have that opinion that he has, and goes into this conspiracy about how, you know, he's a house Negro. Like, he says on one hand that he respects him and, you know, he's cool and he met him and all that, but then you go and say he's a house Negro. He only has what he has because white people gave it to him. Like, it's just, man, it's crazy. Basically, the title of that video will probably be Negroes Don't Know How to Disagree, but I'll address that in the future too.
The part that he said about the white guy, because we want to pounce on him making this statement and alluding to black folks, or talking about somebody in a hoodie that happens to be black and how he'd walk across the street. He talked about the prejudices that exist in all spectrums by all of us. Are we going to sit here and literally act like we don't have any prejudices? Like we don't feel certain way about certain people or certain people's appearances and how it makes us raise our antennas? Am I going to sit here and tell you that if at night and I saw, you know, a couple of white dudes with tats all over their body and their head or whatever, and I'm going to feel comfortable with that, I'm not going to raise an eyebrow? Would I be telling the truth? Particularly if I was in some place like Mississippi or Idaho, not to knock those folks, but you hear where I'm coming from in terms of, you know, sometimes how black folks feel uncomfortable in certain areas geographically in our nation. I mean, this is just a reality, okay? And so as a result of it, you don't do harm to anybody. You don't inflict harm or pain towards anybody else, but does it raise your antennas and makes you a bit suspicious? Sure it does. So what